Welcome to Gman Gaming and Reviews. In today's video, we're diving deep into advanced stratagem tactics for Helldivers 2. So whether you're dealing with overwhelming swarms, massive enemies, or managing your limited equipment slots, I'll break down the best strategies for optimizing your loadout and making sure you're always prepared for any situation. Let's talk about how to pick the best stratagems for your mission and why the right choice can make all the difference when things get heated. In Helldivers 2, there are two important limitations to keep in mind. The first is that you can only equip one support weapon at a time, which means you have to make that decision carefully. Do you want to go with something like the MO105 Stalwart machine gun for sustained fire, especially if you're dealing with swarms? Or do you want to maybe take the anti-material rifle for high precision shots at a distance? Your choice will really depend upon the type of enemy that you're facing. You only have one backpack slot. It's crucial to pick a supportive stratagem that complements your main weapon. Is it going to be the B1 supply backpack to keep your ammo topped off, especially if you've got a machine gun of some kind, whether it's a Stalwart, the machine gun, or the heavy machine gun? Or are you instead going to take the jump pack to help you reach hard to get places, which would be great if you combine it with the anti-material rifle for sniping at heavy enemies from a long range? So you've really got to think about, because you only have one support weapon at a time and one backpack slot, you really have to think about what that's going to be, right? So like for instance, like if you're going to take a support weapon with a backpack slot, there really is no point in taking another support weapon with a backpack slot or another thing with a backpack slot, because you can only have one backpack on. So that's really crucial when it comes to understanding that you've got one backpack slot, one support weapon slot, and etc, etc. So it's really important to understand that when you're putting a loadout together. It's not as problematic when you first start off, but later on, when you start to get to like levels 25, levels 15 onwards, you're going to have a lot more stratagems to pick from than you can take, because you can only take 4 stratagems max. So it's really important to think about your build. The other thing to take into account is the fact that you're not playing alone. So chances are, if you're joining a mission where somebody's already in there, you'll want to try to focus on the weak points of what your allies are taking, right? The next thing we're going to talk about is choosing the right stratagems against swarms. When it comes to dealing with swarms, your stratagems need to be quick, powerful, and efficient. You'll want to focus on area of effect stratagems that can take out multiple targets at once. A couple of useful ones that are available really early on is the Orbital Gatling Barrage, which is fantastic for clearing out swarms of smaller enemies. It's quick, it does continuous damage, and it can stop enemies in their tracks. The good thing about the Orbital Barrage is that it is heavy armor penetrating and explosive. It has a very low cooldown of 70 seconds, which is really low for a stratagem, for a barrage stratagem, so you'll be able to call it in a lot. So it's very useful to take. You get it early on as well. Even in the later stages, this is still a good stratagem because of its very low cooldown time. The next one is, so like I said, the Orbital Gatling Barrage is really great. The Eagle Airstrike creates a carpet bombing effect that's perfect for clearing swarms in the open. So these two stratagems are ideal for softening up large numbers of enemies and giving you breathing room. Now, one of the big advantages of the Eagle Airstrike is that it is explosive and it is anti-tank. So it can actually do significant damage to most enemies, including massive enemies. It won't take them out, or it can, but it won't often take them out, but it'll do enough damage to them to weaken them substantially. So the good thing about the Eagle Airstrike is that it has multiple uses. So it has 2 uses until you have to, and then once it's used up, it takes a cooldown of 2 minutes, depending upon, I can't remember off the top of my head. You can lower that with ship modules, but Eagles have to rearm. They are really good. The next one is, if you're looking to completely shut down a swarm, the Eagle Napalm Airstrike is actually really good as well. It's only got 2 uses, but the fact that it's incendiary actually makes it really good. This is actually really useful against the Automatons, because the Automatons tend to be really slow. Against the bugs, it can be useful. But it's really useful against the Automatons because of the fact that it blocks an area away. So they can't go through the fight, now they have to go around. So it gives you additional time to deal with enemies. The Eagle and Napalm Airstrike creates a wall of fire, stopping enemies dead in their tracks. You use it in tight areas or when you need to funnel enemies into a specific zone. So the longer they stand in the fire, the more damage they take. Especially if there's choke points, it can be very useful to put down the Eagle and the Palm airstrike. The other one that is actually really useful that I use quite a bit is the Eagle Cluster Bomb. This is really useful for, it is explosive, it is medium armor penetrating, it's very good for dealing with swarms of enemies. The fact that it's medium armor penetrating means it will deal with most enemies apart from heavies. But the fact that it has 4 uses and it has a considerably larger area of effect than the Eagle airstrike does, and it has 4 uses. So you can call this in multiple times within a minute, or within a couple of minutes, which actually makes it extremely useful. So it is another one that I use. I'd use it more than the Eagle and the Palm airstrike, but the Eagle and the Palm airstrike has its place. Especially if you get the ship module that gives you the 1 extra use. That just really takes it to like the next level. Okay, so now we're going to move to section 3, which is about handling massive enemies. When it comes to massive enemies like heavy vehicles and armored bosses, you need armor-piercing weapons and powerful single-target stratagems. These enemies can take a lot of damage, but with the right tools, you can tear through their armor and neutralize them effectively. One weapon we're going to talk about is the RS-42 railgun. It's your go-to weapon for massive armored enemies. It has incredible armor penetration and can deal devastating damage to large targets. Since it requires a bit of setup time between shots, you'll want to ensure that you're in a safe position while using it. This is perfect for taking down heavily armored vehicles or bosses from a distance. Really useful against Bile Titans and Impalers, and charges if you get some extra time to shoot at them. It does have a charge up time, but chances are if you're paying attention, as long as it's not a bug breach, you should have enough time to charge this thing up and fire at enemies. Because it requires charging, it does require charge up, but it fires significantly faster than other anti-tank weapons apart from the commando. But it is very useful. Another great option is the spear. So this anti-tank homing missile locks onto the largest target and delivers massive damage. It's ideal for taking down tough tanks and even boss level enemies. You will need to wait for the lock-on to occur, but once it's locked, the missile does all the work. Now, when you're trying to do the lock-on for this one, if you're playing on PC, you'll probably want to go into first-person view. So holding down the aim button, hit the middle mouse button, that'll put you into first person. You also want to do that if you're using the anti-material rifle. You'll need to aim down scope. It's almost impossible to shoot it unless you're doing that. The other one that we're going to talk about is so we had the spear up here. The other one that we're going to talk about is the recoilless rifle. The recoilless rifle is all the hot stuff. The reason that it is in some cases better than the spear is that you don't have to wait for it to lock on to fire. It is pretty slow to load, but especially against the automatons, it is very useful because they tend to throw out a lot of heavy armor. It is still useful against the Terminids, but you want to make sure that if you're taking it, you'll want to take another stratagem like a Gatling Sentry to deal with swarms, or you want to be around the rest of your teammates, especially someone who's a machine gunner who has the stalwart to deal with the swarms of enemies. I found, particularly against the Terminids, even if you've got like your primary weapon, it is possible to get swarmed to the point that you're reloading and you're just not able to hold enough ammunition to take them down. So if you are gonna take the recoilless rifle against the Terminids, you'll definitely want to have ways of dealing with swarms, especially against the Terminids, because they tend to be really fast and they can close in quite quickly. And with their bug breaches, you never really know what's going to come out of a bug breach, and the bug breaches can occur pretty much anywhere. All right, so. Oh, now the other thing that I want to talk about, so the recoilless rifle is a great alternative for when you need to take down armored targets, especially when you're dealing with more mobile or mid-range threats, because unlike the railgun and the recoilless rifle doesn't require a long setup time, you can quickly reposition and get multiple shots off to wear down enemy armor. So the recoilless rifle is pretty much one of my favorites. I'm not a big fan of the spear. It has its uses, but I tend to find the recoilless rifle better because you can I always make sure that I've got a shot that it's always reloaded, so that if I need to pull it out and fire quickly, I can. which is very useful. Alright, so now we're going to move on to section 4. We're going to talk about the difference between Eagle and Orbital barrages. Now, I've already covered this a little bit, but we'll cover this. Yeah, let's talk about the difference between Eagle and Orbital barrages. Now, while they might seem similar, there are key distinctions in their use. Eagle stratagems like the Eagle cluster bomb or Eagle airstrike are great for quick tactical strikes. These are ideal for when you need immediate powerful blast over a small area. The advantage here is that the Eagle stratagems are fast and precise, but they require you to have line of sight and proper positioning to make sure that you're hitting the target effectively. On the other hand, orbital barrages like the Orbital High Explosive Barrage or the Orbital Walking Barrage are heavily artillery strikes with a wider area of effect and are great for larger engagements. These can provide area denial, meaning you can use them to clear out enemies before they even reach your position or to push enemies out of cover. So for instance, I'll go through them. This one is more concentrated. It is anti-tank. It's much useful for taking out enemies in a cluster, right? So it is anti-tank, so you can use it against big enemies as well. The Orbital 300 High Explosive Barrage is more for dealing with big bug nests and big automaton factories. One thing to also keep in mind about Eagle stratagems is that if you're playing against the automatons, the big automaton factories do have anti-air, which means that your Eagles can get taken out by automaton factories if you try to use them, if you're not careful. That doesn't mean that Eagle airstrikes aren't useful. It just means that they're more useful when you're in a defensive capacity or in a reactionary capacity, right? So the Orbital Walking Barrage is really good for dealing with the automatons. It's great for dealing with automaton factories, but it's also really good for dealing with automaton patrols because the automatons tend to be really slow, but they tend to approach in a gun line. So the Orbital Barrage is absolutely perfect for dealing with the automatons. It's, as you can see here, it looks like it's almost designed for the automatons. Another one that we will cover is the Orbital Napalm Barrage. It's basically similar to the 300, the High Explosive Barrage, but instead of being anti-tank, it's incendiary. In some cases, it is better because it's really good for dealing with bug nests, and it's got massive area of denial. So it's like a pick between, do you want anti-tank to also deal with heavies, or do you want the Napalm Barrage in order to make sure that nothing apart from those heavies could get through that area? They both have their uses. They're not necessarily better than each other. They just really have their uses. So going back to dealing with massive enemies, there's another couple of things here that are really useful. The Orbital Rail Cannon Strike is, as you can see here, is really good for dealing with big enemies. It is extremely powerful. The only problem with it is that it only attacks one target, and it has a very high cooldown time of 210 seconds. You're probably not going to be able to use it very often, so you'll probably want to save it for when you're in trouble. But it is extremely powerful. The other one that, in my opinion, is a little bit better is the Eagle 110 rocket pods. This one also will target the largest enemy near the stratagem. It has two uses and it's anti-tank. It is a little bit weaker than the Orbital Rail Cannon Strike, but because it has two uses, if you miss the first time, you still have a chance to hit the second time. The other one that you can also do is the Eagle 500 kilogram bomb. It's also anti-tank, kills pretty much anything in the vicinity. The only important thing about this one is make sure that you hit the right place, because you don't want the enemy to exit the area, but also very useful. We're going to move on to section 5, which is key strategy considerations for missions. It's an important thing to consider your overall strategy, especially when we're talking about like team coordination. So since you can only have one support weapon and one backpack slot, you'll need to rely on your teammates to fill the gaps. So let them take care of suppressive fire with the MO105 Stalwart or the MG43 machine gun or the heavy machine gun, while you focus on anti-armor or artillery, or vice versa. I normally focus on swarms because I tend to take the Stalwart against the Terminids quite a bit because I've had a lot of experience where I've been swarmed with enemies. But yeah, so you want to have a dedicated sort of like role. Or you can focus on anti-armor and heavy artillery by, say, taking the recoilless rifle, the Eagle airstrike, and things like that. So you want to make sure that you communicate with your team to use defensive strategies. Like the shield generator relay is really useful against the automatons. It's very powerful against them. Almost useless against the Terminids, but it's very useful against the Automatons. It's one of the best stratagems you can take against the Automatons, especially with a team. And it's also important that you support each other with ammo resupplies like the B1 supply pack. You get the B1 supply pack really early on. It is very useful to take with the Stalwart or a machine gun to keep you resupplied, but it's also very useful for keeping your team resupplied, especially if someone's got like a recoilless rifle or somebody like that. Keeping them resupplied can be really useful, because I think the recoilless rifle only has 6 shots before you get to reload. These kinds of stratagems allow for continuous engagement without having to worry about running out of ammunition or being overrun. Conclusion, so to wrap things up, Helldivers 2 requires you to think strategically about the stratagems you bring into each mission. Understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the Automatons, the Terminid swarms, massive enemies, allows you to create the combination of offense, defense, support, and remember, teamwork is key. If you found these tips useful, don't forget to comment and subscribe for more Helldivers 2 strategies. Stay sharp and good luck out there, Helldiver.